Welcome back, everyone, to episode 28 of the infinite season of the Kriya Yoga podcast. In this episode, we have a talk from Ryan Strong, who is a Kriya Yoga teacher. He studied with Roy Eugene Davis through Center for Spiritual Awareness, and he's been a dear friend of mine pretty much as long as both of us have been practicing Kriya Yoga. You've heard him on the podcast before. And you might have also gone on retreat with myself, Ryan Strong, and his partner Shalin in California back in May of 2025. And speaking of retreats and Mr. Strong, he and his partner Shalin will be hosting a retreat in the northeast of the United States in October of 2026. So if you want to find out more information on that, you can go to the livingkriyayoga.org/events page, and this retreat will be happening October 23rd, 24th, 25th, 2026 in New England. This will be a wonderful opportunity for you to learn about Kriya Yoga and also to participate in a Kriya Yoga initiation if that's something that's meaningful and important to you. In this talk, Ryan discusses the importance and power of spiritual connection and how to recognize that you are successfully engaging your spiritual path. This talk comes from, I believe it was July 24th, 2026. It was one of the Kriya Yoga Alliance talks. And the Kriya Yoga Alliance are mainly a group of students of Roy Eugene Davis, who studied with Paramahansa Yogananda. And they offer workshops and retreats throughout the year, online and in person, but they also have weekly Sunday services and meditations. So if you want to participate in any of the live events with the Kriya Yoga Alliance, you can go to kriyayogaalliance.com and scroll down about halfway through the page, and you'll find the Zoom links to log into the regular Sunday services. All right, well, that's enough introduction. And here is the talk from Ryan Strong, which was recorded on July 24th, 2026.
I started to come out here to Massachusetts. I think it was around first time I came out here to this little town. It's called Williamsburg. It's this little village by itself it's the western part of Massachusetts near Vermont. And it was 2020, the first time I came out here. And I was coming out here for years when Shalin, wonderful Shalin, she started to get into this practice called pitṛ, pitṛ tarpaṇa. And it's a very simple, beautiful practice of honoring and working with ancestors. It's a traditional Vedic practice. And she said, will you do it with me? You do this ceremony with me? I said, sure, why not? And so we found this beautiful place, literally across the street from her house, there's a river. And so we went over there and I went through it. It was fun. It's interesting. And it was very novel. Kind of, what are we doing? And she's saying these special mantras and offering sesame seeds and milk to our loved ones that are departed and to other people that have left this planet. But anyways, the story and the reason I'm telling you this is that after the first time I did it, it was a couple of days later, I was walking through the town by myself and I saw a plaque. And it was one of those war memorials you'll see. And this was for the Civil War. And I was just looking at it. And I saw a name, Reverend Joseph Strong. And I thought, well, that's interesting. There's a lot of Strongs in the United States. And so I didn't think too much of it. But the fact that he lived in Williamsburg made me kind of look him up. And so I did. I looked him up. And I found out through just a simple Google search that he was buried across the street from her house and his family. And that this beautiful old cemetery where a lot of people in this old cemetery, the dates go all the way back, their death dates to the early 1800s. And many of the people buried up there were actually born in England. But this cemetery was like 2/3 full of Strongs. And so there's a really interesting connection. It's like coming into this little town and to find out there's all these Strongs. And it wasn't just that we had the same last name, very easily I was able to find out this was my lineage. And that the very first Strong that had come over to the United States in 1630 was actually one of the founders of the town. And his burial was 5 miles down the road. And just the reason I'm bringing this up is that on the spiritual paths and just in life, if we look for it, we are constantly surprised and uplifted, guided by these interesting connections. The path of mysticism, path of true spirituality, is to be in alignment with spirit, and alignment with the whole of life. And in this way we live, in this alignment, it is constantly unfolding and giving us these little, sometimes big, moments of connection. And all these little pieces, all these little things and big things are, or can be, very supportive for our awakening path, for our growth. And sometimes it's just sometimes it's just a wink from the universe. And when we look at the word, connection, it goes back into the Latin word nectare. And this word nectare means to bind or to tie or to unite. So the original meaning of connect goes back to nectare, which means to bind, to unite, or to connect. But also the word nectare, if you think about it, has that nectar, right? So nectare, to bind, to tie, to unite, connect. And going a little bit further into it, the word connect or connection relates to the essence, the nectar of the essence, that which combine, or that which holds things or unites things together. Right. And so on our awakening path, our goal is to have our awareness restored to its natural, pure state. And all of our practices and how we live and everything we do is to unveil what is already true. And when we experience the state, at first, you notice that something has changed. There's a change in the way that you're perceiving. But what's really interesting is that at the same time, you realize that this state is true and that it has always been that way. All right. You might not have been consciously aware of it, but truth does not change. And when your awareness is restored, yes, there might be a little different perspective at first, but you realize it's always been this way. And when we are living on the spiritual path, and even people that are not, right? Consciously, every single person is on the spiritual path. They're on a journey of awakening through circumstances that will eventually culminate in becoming spiritually awake. But being on the Kriya yogic path or being on an authentic spiritual path is to work with this consciously, that we are doing everything that we can to have our awareness restored to that natural, pure state. And until we are, there are these impulses, these callings, things that can be defined as like a magnetism that speak to us, right? That come up in our heart. When I was 17 and I didn't even know who Yogananda really was. I did not know at all that yoga was a philosophy, but I knew that I had to find him, and it didn't make sense. I have to go find Yogananda. And then I'd read that he had left the body in 1952. And so there was this magnetism, something from my heart informed my mind. My heart, the essence of my being, spoke to me and it said, you have to follow this thread. You have to find Yogananda. And and following that thread, I was able to find my teacher, Mr. Roy G. Davis. And then finding Mr. Davis, I was able to discover about Ayurveda and Jyotish. Like every good thing in my life comes from that magnetism, following that impulse, right? Which is not a mental construct, right? It comes from our essence of our being. It comes from our heart. And it says, hey, go here. Learn about this. Whatever it is, little or big, it is guiding us towards having our restoration of consciousness every step of the way. And it's not always easy for everyone to follow it. And a lot of times people will get out of the habit of following it, right? We get all in our heads and there's a lot that happens in our life. And the way to think about this, or for today, for the talk, an interesting or possibly interesting way to look at this is all of these connections that our heart informs us that we follow, they culminate in these events and circumstances and unplanned good fortune that support our awakening, right? And we want to keep making those connections. And it's like a tree, like a tree. A few weeks ago, I was down in the canyon hiking, and I know I've talked about it almost every time, but there's these giant, beautiful sycamore trees. They're just massive. It's beautiful sycamore trees. What's so interesting about them is that they are living in the canyon on the rocks. And so these sycamore trees, they wrap their roots around these rocks. They go down into the sand, into the gravel, and they go all the way to the water. They're holding on through all these floods and all this kind of stuff. And they're just creating all of these roots down into the water. And each one of those roots that finds the water is its connection to its life force energy, the essence that keeps it alive. And we were in the canyon, and there was this one spot that we could see into underneath like a cave. It's hard to explain. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that we could see the root system of this one big, beautiful sycamore. And it was massive, had this mat of roots, all of these little single connections going out and into the water. And so when we are thinking about our own path and these little things, these connections, they all are ways that we feed our spiritual path. They're all ways that we grow. And the more connection we have, the more we grow, and the more we open up, the more we heal, right? The more connection that we have to truth, to God, to authentic spiritual growth, we don't hate. We don't have as much anger or none at all, right? We're not judging ourselves harshly and judging others harshly, right? The pain, the fear, the suffering, these things start to loosen up. They start to go away, and they are replaced with understanding, replaced with acceptance, non-attachment, truth, honesty, having this sense of, I don't want to harm anything or anyone. And I don't want to harm myself, right? These are these little things that just naturally come from this process of spiritual growth. And we can know if we're growing or not. Sometimes they say spirit awakening is like bankruptcy. They say it's a little by a little and then all at once. And it can be that way, but it's different for each person. But until we know that we are fully anchored in the self in a way, how can we tell if we're actually growing? It's pretty easy. We can look at our life and we can say, is my awareness expanding? Do I have is my consciousness expanding? So that looks like my relationships are growing. Maybe even if it's not a lot of people, maybe it's a few, or maybe it's a lot, but the depth of connection and enjoyment and enrichment that you receive in connection to relationships is increasing. self-understanding and communication and growth. That's happening for you on some level. You look at your relationship with your environment, right? How you tune into nature and the plants, and how you're just opening up and expanding and enjoying life in the most simplest of ways, right? And again, this is different for each person, but we know that we are expanding into a larger reality that is open, that is free from as much suffering, free from as much confusion, free from as much pain, right? There's just more clarity and expansion, right? That's those roots growing and creating all of those connections, or increased connections, leading back to the one thing, the one source. But if we look at our life and it's the opposite, we're contracting, we're not growing, right? We're growing into more fear. We are more judgmental of ourselves. We're more judgmental of others, right? There's things that we want to do, but we're afraid, right? And so we're allowing that fear to hold us back, right? So either we're expanding out in the way that's appropriate and right for us, or we're contracting, right? And so when we are looking at our life, especially in regards to habits, relationships, environments, we want to be the tree that has a lot of roots moving out into that water. If we only have one or two, and maybe one, and we're trying to get all of that nectar, that nectare, right? We talked about the amrita, the nectar of immortality, right? There's this term nectar that comes up over and over. If we're getting all of that nectar from one place, and it's all coming from one place, but in our individual life, if we're just trying to get all from one relationship, we're trying to be fed from this, or fed from one experience. I need to have this in my life to be happy, right? And we're putting all of this into one thing. It's maybe not going to be helpful, right? Especially if we are in a relationship with a job, a person, a environment that is not growing with us. There can be hard things that come up in relationships. It's like there's going to be some conflict. There's going to be some things that people said or did. There's all this stuff. Can we grow together, right? So we can take that experience and learn from it, and then we can expand into the present together. And that's even the best relationship in the world is going to have conflict, but that's the difference. It is how we turn this thing that we're experiencing into more awareness, right? But if it's the opposite, if we're in a situation, with a person, a place, or an addiction, it's taking all of our time, all of our energy. It's constricting that nectar, that growth, those roots are expanding out, and our consciousness and our life is not expanding into more connection. And it's how the opposite is happening, right? So that is the question to look at. Where in my life am I expanding? Where in my life am I seeing greater and greater connection on the spiritual path? And is this helping me grow? Or am I engaged in things that are limiting my connection to the divine? And if that's the case, then we must have the courage. We must have the courage to make the changes that we need to make, right? And it's not always easy. But if we dedicate ourselves to truth, as Patanjali recommends, right? That we dedicate our life to truth, to knowing the truth, to living the truth, right? And we're talking about the ultimate truth. We're not talking about pushing our truth onto others, right? We're talking about the truth, the one truth. Are we dedicated to it? And are we living in more, are we moving towards more alignment with it? And are we living in a way that is peaceful, in the sense that we don't have any ill will, violent feelings, thoughts towards others, right? We want to be on good terms with all of being. It doesn't mean that we have to like everything that people do, as I've said before, but we want to find a place within our heart that we are open to and on good terms with ourself and all of being. So if that's true, and we're dedicated to truth, then these things that we sometimes get entangled in or that limit our experience and growth, we're going to avoid them. It's just natural. But if we find ourselves in this thing where our experience is becoming limited, we just want to return back to the truth, back to ahimsa, and have complete courage to follow through. And we can look towards the connection that we have with one another, and maybe most importantly, the connection that we have with the lineage, the teachers, the saints, the sages. And we can look at their lives. We can see where they had to make adjustments, where they had to make changes, where they had to grow. And we can draw upon our connection to them because we are connected to them. They have brought this to us now, their service and their lifetime, some of them 200 years ago almost. It's working and supporting us right now. So we can draw upon that, draw upon their experience, draw upon what they went through to have the support, the courage, the guidance that we need to get over, get beyond, to get through, so that we can have more connections and have more expansive experience. Lastly, the ultimate restoring of connection is every day we want to sit and meditate until we are able to have our thoughts in the wave-like fluctuations of the mind settle. We either become detached from them, maybe they're still there, but we're not interacting with them. They're just in the background. Or we meditate to get to a place where they are just super quiet, or even better, where they become dormant. We want to practice this. It's essential to get into that place of stillness, because as soon as we are able to fall into that place, our true connection to the essence of life is restored, at least in that moment, at least for a while. We are truly connected and identified with our essence, right? And that's the practice. And if we just do that and we live honestly, dedicated to truth and with ahimsa, we're just going to continue to expand, right? But again, if we find ourselves in a situation, let's get over it. Let's get beyond it. We want to be that, again, using the tree as an example, is the more connections it has to its life force energy, that water, the more leaves it has. So the tree is just wanting to grow more and more leaves to get what? More and more sun, more and more radiance. So a lot of us are that's like the spiritual path. We're trying to increase our acceptance and experience of light. But we want to get to a place where we realize that we might be experiencing, I'm a tree or I'm a person, but I'm actually the light. You're actually the light. So our connection, it is restored when we have the experience of our pure essence of being.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Kriya Yoga podcast. To learn more about Kriya Yoga meditation, you can visit us at kriyayogaonline.com, where you can find information about current book releases, online classes, and in-person retreats throughout the year. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, visit us at the Kriya Yoga Online Patreon community at patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.
Om Gam Ganapataye